Hello, ladies and gents. Welcome to another episode of Skybox Sessions. Today we'll be looking at NUKE, and there'll be definitely many episodes on NUKE because it's a very interesting map. And in terms of the defaults, it can look very different, although there will be some familiar features that will be somewhat consistent. So today I'm going to take a Team Liquid and Astralis matchup on this map. Two fantastic teams, of course, for NUKE. This is taken from late last year, late 2019, so somewhat recent. And I'm going to take a slightly different approach. I'm going to go over quite quickly just some basic points about the map control and the things that we can expect to see in terms of the default. And then we're going to just look at some rounds as an example of a few different permutations and a few different options that have been selected by Astralis in this instance, and kind of just look at how their options have affected the rotations of Team Liquid and the options of Team Liquid, and so on and so forth. So, first of all, I think it's fair to say the most consistent thing that we would see on a map like NUKE is the outside smokes. These are, extremely, popular, and one of the reasons for that is because, if you're going to be doing this every single round, you're kind of conditioning the CTs to, due to the loss of information, to having to play it safe, either with an aggressive setup. And I suppose that's not the safest way to play it, but an aggressive setup to get the information, or the other way to get the information, or to at least be somewhat safe against what could come. If I can find the NUKE's quite awkward, is to have somebody, either playing, the stairs position so they can, watch out for the push here, or, the other stairs towards decontamination room. And that's going to have to be a rotation that's made immediately. Generally speaking, if you're a team that's fearful that your opponents might be going for faster outside timings, you're just going to have to hightail it straight through the store, straight to the stairs. And if it's a slower round, of course, you can start to walk up if you have more information outside to try to pressure the T-red position. That's one option. Or the other option, if you're playing it more aggressively, as we mentioned, for the CTs, to try to get this information back that you've lost with the smokes such as this, is by dropping your own smoke, which kind of blocks off this path, which then that smoke allows a very fast cross to this position, and you can kind of just about beat the T's if you've got a good enough spawn and so on, to a more committed position here. Obviously, it requires more support from your teammates outside, but these are some of the common options that we're going to see the CTs trying to utilize to deal with these outside smokes. Now, a couple quick notes, tactically speaking, is that sometimes the T side will leave this smoke open. They won't actually throw this from, back towards T spawn. And one of the reasons is because the CTs can throw a quick incendiary, which would block that, or at least create a gap, which can basically ruin an entire round if there's a gap between these two smokes. So what tends to happen is you'll see the T smoke this and smoke this, and then leave this one open. And once they're closer to T reds, if they're really deciding to commit, they'll just drop a smoke here. Now, there obviously the slight downside to that is you are giving up the information that, because it's if a CT is watching that gap, he's going to see that it's like an underhanded smoke effectively into that position. So it does give some information, but again, it still doesn't give the whole picture. You still have to respect that they could just have one player there or four players there. It's really that idea that was coined by Devilwalk all those years ago. This is a very important concept in Counter-Strike, so try to remember this one. The threat is greater than the action, meaning that you just threatening a position, pressuring a position, means that the other team effectively have to account for an aggression from that position. Even if you decide to go and do something completely different, they still have to worry about that. They still have to make sure that the angles they're choosing, is safe against that position that you just pressured, where you could potentially aggress upon them from. So the threat is greater than the action. It's something Devilwalk mentioned, I think, to me in like 2015. I think it's quite an apt way to describe that concept in Counter-Strike. And so it's something worth remembering in this situation, and it applies, in all sorts of scenarios. And so looking at, NUKE, we've talked about outside a little bit. Again, I don't want to go too crazy about this in terms of covering every single thing with the default, but obviously lobby is important as well. And, you'll often see there will be some teams that actually add to their default with blowing open the squeaky door and dropping a smoke here, which basically creates a similar kind of impact insofar as if the CTs don't have someone quite quickly enough into positions to really kind of deal with this, it can be difficult to know, especially if there's a lot of sound being made at the same time, if a T is actually dropped into the vent. So this is a really huge issue, and it's something whereby, again, just the two nades kind of suggest that. So the CTs have to worry about that and kind of prepare for that. So that's another annoyance. Doesn't feature in everyone's defaults. I would say that Rops from Mousesports 2018 was the first person that really popularized this type of play. And he's probably one of the best kind of lurkers in the business. And he was very innovative. So obviously another thing to think about is obviously just having this setup where you have like the three outside and you have the two kind of watching lobby, making sure the lobby's not going to get pushed from Squeaky or from Hut, and making sure that trophy room, radio room, whatever you want to call it, is not going to get pushed from the CTs as well. Just maintaining presence in those positions so the CTs cannot push and get information, whilst in the meantime, working outside. And there is a variety of things you can do outside. There's like four options effectively. You can try to, get into main. You can go down secret, obviously. You can try to attack towards the heaven position. And you can also fake things and fake presence and so on, and lurk and everything else. So lots of options there for the T side. So with that said, and for you guys who have watched some of the previous videos, you would have seen me talking a lot more about generally how defaults kind of try to take away map control, and with the take of information, that's what creates problems for the CTs. NUKE is interesting because NUKE is slightly different in the sense that one of the reasons why the information is so important for the CTs when we were talking about those previous maps, Mirage, Inferno, Dust 2, is because rotations can be really punishing. And what can cut your rotation time in half is you having the information. I mean, if you know where they're going to go, then you can already be rotating there, and that big rotation time, it's not that big of a deal. But if you don't know where they're going to go, then suddenly there's a huge window of time where the Ts can get into position and effectively get into advantage. Now, on this map in particular, what's really interesting about it is the fact that we have the two bomb sites stacked on top of each other. So the rotation time in theory isn't that bad. It has been weakened slightly given the change to the vent system that we had, where there's no exit immediately onto the lower bomb site, and you kind of have to snake your way around instead. You can see my little squiggly lines. You know what I'm talking about. And so that's been nerfed slightly, but it's still a pretty good rotation time for the CTs. So it's not quite as much about trying to deny information as it is about trying to outmaneuver the CTs in other ways by suggesting one thing and then doing something else. And because for the CTs it's pretty risky to play very aggressively, generally what tends to be the best way to play this map, and the most consistent way to play a CT side on this map, is to play really good CT rotations. So if they're pressuring outside, then you rotate one guy down to ramp, or you have two people on the lower bomb site, so they're ready to go. Or if the ramp room's getting pressured, then this guy just drops down, and then the guy who's watching outside, suddenly he repositions, and then he takes an angle with his AWP towards the ramp room to make sure they can't get towards heaven. Like, it's just about controlling the flow of the Ts and slowing them down as they go, and then adjusting your rotations as a team so that you can be there ready in time. And that is kind of that's the give and take of NUKE effectively on the CT side. So now looking at the rounds, I think I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit. Let's have a look at and see how this round plays out for Astralis. And we'll also take note of the CT setups because we want to look at those rotations and how the play of the Ts really impacts them. Okay, so let's go back quickly. I don't want to get, again, like I always say, I don't want to get too bogged down by all of the grenade work, but it is fairly important to note sometimes, as I mentioned. So we get that smoke here from the CTs to allow a fast cross to secret for a liege if necessary, or at least to suggest that that's a possibility, and to also slow down the Ts if they were to try to push forward for a fast main play. This smoke comes down a little bit later, and as I mentioned, this one's been left open. You see Glaive has the smoke here. He's going to drop that smoke. There's a little underhanded smoke, and whether or not Elish spotted that, necessarily. He's going to be feeling quite confident to get that nade in. So this has been created here. And it's, again, as I mentioned, as far as Alicia's seen, he's only seen one smoke grenade, which plugged this hole. Could be 1 player, 3, 4, 2, 5, who knows how many behind this. But they have to respect it. So we've already got, Naf, who went downstairs immediately to try to account for this. And we're actually going to see a pretty damn fast play outside from Astralis. And typically what we see in situations like this is not putting all of your eggs in one basket, especially with players who are as good as they are on this level. When you have an elite level lurker, you really want to give them an opportunity in a round that's fast moving like this, where the CTs are going to have to scramble on their rotations to have somebody lurking. And in this case, Zipex is kind of lurking outside. So he's going to be able to, and this is really an important one, because when you have these smokes as a tease, the sword cuts both ways. You give up information, you take information away from the CTs, but you also lose information towards the outside area completely. So you need somebody that can make sure that you're not going to get backstabbed from garage. That's really critical, because if there was a CT that was in garage and he heard any level of footsteps and he decides to go for a rotation into the flank, that creates a lot of problems, especially when the Ts are moving for a fast timing. So that's one of the important parts of Zipex's position there. So we'll have the play down lower, and what I want to quickly go over, because again, this is so much about timings. So this first contact is the point at which we understand, or that Team Liquid understand, there's a commitment from the T's here, and that their positions need to change. Because if we look at their current positioning, right, Stewie is just playing it chill here, just playing the delay game, playing the information game. He's got the Molotov in his hand. That really tells you everything you need to know. You got the 2 players on the upper bomb side. There's been the smoke here on Squeaky, which obviously means, as far as they're concerned, there could be someone lurking Squeaky door. There's all sorts of plays that can be made. Also coming up through the vents, if the T's went down lower, is also a possibility. Kind of a quirky split. Lots of things are possible here. So there's no rotations that have been made. It's just standard positions, and you've got also a player here making sure that if they are to go back through the smoke, that's covered for. So at this point, out of this first contact, we want to see what is the reaction here. And we're doing this as an exercise to better understand CT rotations. And for those of you at home who want to watch demos and learn from them, looking and seeing what the CTs, let's say in this particular instance, because you want to understand the CT side of NUKE better, looking and seeing how the CTs respond to some information, then you can kind of deconstruct that and deduce the logic pretty easily. And then that logic should be applicable across a variety of maps. It should be a fairly consistent piece of logic for you to follow. So it's a good way to kind of understand, or better understand, how to get the value out of watching demos. Okay, so boom. Okay, so he's dead now. So let's have a look and see what happens with the CTs. I'm going to try to... NUKE is really awkward even with Skybox. Okay, so there's a little bit of a pause here from the CTs. They're a little bit unsure, and then immediately you can hit just as the running's heard. We have the drop from Stewie. He drops the molly here to make sure that there's no one that can fast flank him. But already you can see that the T's have hit a timing here, whereby they're already going to outposition the CTs. So he's going to try to get into position in time. He's not going to be able to make it. Now, quick note, and we might see this in a moment, if you're ever using nades in this area defensively as T's, you smoke this, you Molotov this. That's a Molotov. The reason is because, and you'll pretty much almost always see this in pro level play, is because this is a right eye peak. So you don't want to give the CTs a right eye peak ultimately, because the right eye peak is much better, especially considering that the point of engagement is very close, meaning that this left eye peak is awful. It's absolutely awful for the CTs. And on top of that, once this position, you can kind of more effectively jiggle each position that you may be worrying about. So whether it's going to be this position or this position or this position, you can kind of clear those systematically, and then same with these positions, whatever it is, and then eventually you get this also peak to the window. Look out! I mean, that's a pretty effective way. That's kind of nice. You can kind of take each position one at a time, but in this spot, you can't really do that. Like, you're kind of left eyeing a bunch of spots at once, or trying to, and then if you want to go deep for this position, you're just exposed to so many different things. And there's lots of different ways they can play this angle against you. And you're very committed when you're walking out here. So you want to Molotov this and you want to smoke this. Okay, I just want to make that clear because a lot of people don't understand the distinction there. Right. Okay, so this round is effectively won just through positioning and timing. And so I just wanted to demonstrate, the power of that quickly. Okay, so moving into the next round, let's have a look and see. Oh, I've been up here before. This high up. Let's have a look and see how this next round plays out in terms of what Astralis do. We still have somewhat of a 4-buy here for the CT side. So again, we see that smoke. This time, Elige is making his way across the secret. He's got Nav here at credit card for support, and there's only one smoke here initially from the T's. We can see 2 are outside. Already Dupree's made his way down the vent. So if you guys, just for you guys, so you can get the visualization, we can go back a little bit and we can see this is what I was talking about before. Doors blown open. Oh, actually, he just went for a fast timing without even a smoke there. So that's pretty baller from Dupree, but it's going to work out. So this is a really huge problem because they actually know, they 100% know. Oftentimes there can be a level of uncertainty as to a player sneaking down or not, but they actually know. So we can see what's happening here. Stewie is forced to go down here to make sure that nothing's going on. Dupree's already in this deep position. And this has created an issue here also for Elige. He's got to give up the outside because now he's worrying about this lower position. So this is a huge disruption just from one player sneaking down vent. And that's part of the power of the vent for the T side, especially at early timings. So you're going to see that everything has to be cleared here. So this is a really huge problem for, I believe this is Elige. And it's going to be an awkward scenario here in the vent, but the kill goes to Elige. So that's pretty cool because obviously the CTs were definitely behind in terms of positioning. But the question now remains, do they understand that it was Dupree that went down and not Glaive? Because they killed Glaive. So this is kind of an issue. So this is cool in the sense of Astralis' initial plan maybe didn't go as they had wanted, but what do they have? They've got themselves probably an unknown player. His position is unknown, and he's down in control room already. So they're going to have to change whatever their plan was of the rounds to kind of incorporate, to account for this. And because they didn't give up position outside, they have a base to work from in that sense. And you can see Magisk is already in a pretty forward position around main. So we're going to see a rotation down here from Astralis in this instance, because it's really one of their best options because it allows them to play with Dupree. Because we've got to think about this. We want to make every single asset on the team valuable in the rounds. And so imagine if they tried to go upper. Well, I mean, if they went upper, sure, Dupree could try to go through the vent, but he wouldn't really be that impactful in terms of the engagements most likely. And there's a lot that could go wrong with that. But given that the CTs lost a player, they've lost Elige, who is one of the outside players or one of the people that watches after Secret, it also makes a lot of sense in knowing that information and also in knowing that the CTs want to tighten their defense over time, that this is going to be forfeit in terms of map control for the CTs. In a situation like this, it's very often going to be forfeited, which means that they know that with some relative consistency, they can get down into this position. Now, there is this principle of timing and tightening the defense that applies across every map. I'll give you another example on Dust 2, for example. We have a situation where at the beginning of the round, you may have 3 CTs defending a rush timing at the beginning of the round. Okay, but over time, if you play a very slow round, what tends to happen is CTs will become more worried about execution or set pieces because there's been the time for you to get the map controllers, the T side, to set up that kind of a play, and that's going to be pretty devastating if it hits without any defense in place to deal with it. So that means by that notion that long in this instance would not have 3 players anymore. It's very likely it's going to have probably just 1. So if you go for a late long take, it's going to be significantly easier, or technically should be more consistent than if you were to try to take long at the beginning of the round where maybe you didn't have great spawns. So this is a similar kind of thing. The later in the round that it gets, that actually alters the way that the CTs may play their setups. So that's a really important thing to think about, because especially if you're in pugs and stuff, it's even quite noticeable and as a truth of Counter-Strike, even in an unorganized environment. So we see, again, it's all about the out-positioning the opponent, and the closest person here is going to be Stewie, and there's not really that much he can do at this point. He's kind of stuck in this choke point. He can't safely make it forward because he doesn't know if there's already a T in this position. So it's basically just an awful, awful position to be in. The T's can come out of the door, and there is the Molotov we were talking about. Now, you can see how awkward this is for the CTs. There's literally nothing that they can do. They're trying to smoke off this position, but there's still the issue that this is the only choke point they have available to them. So this is just another instance of just out positioning and understanding how quickly you need to go as a unit to successfully out position your opponents, given what you expect on the map, given what's happened, their situation in terms of losing a player. Also, again, as I mentioned, they already had Dupree in a position around control if they wanted, and that also gives them a sense of consistency behind the choice for the round, because they know that at this point, okay, sure, there could be somebody in the vent, but that's really the worst thing that could happen. And you know what? If there is somebody in the vent, there's 3 players coming from this position, so they're fine. What's most important is having a guy here that controls the entrance to the bomb site, and that's effectively what Dupree was doing. So in knowing that no one had actually gone through these positions, it actually created a huge amount of safety for Astralis in knowing where they could attack from and how they could attack. And in doing so, they also effectively use their 4th player, let's say Dupree in this instance. So another good round from Astralis where they just win through timing and positioning. So let's pick another gun round, and we'll end it after this one. And again, I really would love feedback from you guys in terms of length of video, because I've been kind of dancing around between, should it be very short? Should we just do like 1 round? Should we do bite-sized episodes? Or do you guys like the longer form for this kind of content? At this point in time, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. So if you guys have any opinions explicitly on that, please let me know. So into this one, this will be the final one for this video. And again, as I mentioned, we'll do many more nukes. We get, again, that same smoke from the T side, just the cross smoke. You're going to have to get that always. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of angles where the CTs would be able to see what you're doing. And that's the entire point of these smokes, is that they don't know how many players are crossing towards the secret position. So you need this smoke at all times. And then we see, once again, the smoke for a liege here in this position, which also allows the CTs to kind of play in lots of sneaky spots. And Astralis are a team that, against certain teams, they will Molotov this position quite often if they feel like it's a team that's particularly aggressive outside. Okay, and so we get a flashbang indeed. So we've got a Legion in aggressive position. So this is an adjustment for them. And you can see that, let's have a quick check on the rest of the players. In terms of the default here, it's relatively similar in terms of that last round we looked at, where we get this kind of pressure from the door position, which I believe has been blown open, as well as having these 2 players here and just having one player kind of keeping control of trophy room, making sure there's no push there. So again, we have that kind of spread across the entire map that's common for defaults. So right now it's about Glaive trying to threaten positioning. Now, of course, we can see that there's no smokes here. And there's also, NAF is close enough around Garage to be able to spot for this. So there's the deep molly, which would serve to push back any aggressive players in this position. Now, this is the way that you might want to alter your default. If you've been exploiting these smokes a lot and exploiting the push down secret a lot, then you may expect an aggressive adjustment. So we're seeing that Molotov to kind of force back a player there. And one of the reasons you might do that is to suggest that you're pushing forwards into the outside positions, because obviously this Molotov would force this player back, but it also allows, if you have players on silo, to come down as well, so that, because otherwise this guy could potentially peek them. So that's another thing that Molotov does. It's a very deep Molotov, and we're kind of keeping checks on the CT positioning. They don't have enough information to really go on too much, but as I was talking about, as time goes on, even though there's no information, what happens here, Naf, he tightens it up. He goes back towards the core of the defense. He's no longer alone outside. He's giving up that position towards the 1 minute mark, and playing more conservatively. Now he can help Stewie if necessary. Now he can go upstairs if necessary. This is the timing where, okay, we haven't seen too much outside. We could be expecting that there would be maybe a set piece in the upper bomb site, which may or may not be coming as far as, we understand. But, they're operating from a position of we want to be the most consistent possible. We want to have the least openings possible. So we're going to try to account for everything. And as I said, this is the nature of this map. You just play tight CD setups, especially as time goes on. And as T's, you can abuse that. And now the smokes come across. But again, even if you see these smokes and you know that probably somebody's going down secret, you have no idea how many. And that's always going to be a problem. So Glaive and Zipex will make their way down, and we can just quickly look at what the movements have been for Magus. So Magus has managed to get himself down here. I actually didn't catch that, so let's see exactly how he made his movement. Now, presumably it was from down the vent. Let's have a look. We can just go in his perspective because Skybox is awesome indeed. So it looks like it was going to be down the vent. So there's the forward smoke. So they're playing a much slower pace in this round, which is very confusing for the CT side. So able to get down without being spotted, and that's always so devastating for the CTs because they can't have players in position in time. And we already talked about some of the benefits of Dupree when he was able to get to these positions. And this is really cool because Magus can see no one peeking these positions, can be fairly certain that he has the entire bomb site at this point. So we're going to go into the free look again, and we're going to see the rest of his team react. You can see Dupree's also gone down with him. He's looking up for any rotations back out, and there's so many options here for the T side. If we can find Zipex, where are you at? So Zipex is the one with the bomb here. So they have the ability, if they want, to really trick the CTs and go up and down. So we'll see how they play it exactly. Team Liquid are in that, again, as I mentioned, that awful spot where they can't really commit one way or the other. And then we get that late outside play, and there's a smoke across the garage. And the reason why you have this smoke first is because at this point in the round, the CTs will more likely be on these positions with these kinds of lines of sight. So that's why you're doing this smoke first, and then this smoke's always second anyways. And then down they go. And obviously with Magus already in position, his presence has now been spotted by Stewie. Let's go back a little bit and see how this actually went down, if Liquid figured it out first or not. Okay, so they saw the outside smokes and they begun to figure out that there's problems and they've got to start going for a rotation shortly. So Magus is just getting into a deep off angle. This is obviously this is not a spot that you would expect to see a T. Man, Liquid are in so much trouble. So now the rotation comes down secret. Now the CTs are like, okay, we've got to start worrying about the lower bomb site. Twist is clearing positions around lobby. They're starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together, but is it too late? And I think the answer is yes. It's far too late. And this is one of the reasons why Astralis is so good at NUKE, because we just saw 3 rounds where they were consistently able to, with different timings and different permutations of playing the outside smokes, they were able to shut this down. And we actually get a smoke there on the right side. So I want to see who threw that. Okay, so we get the Molotov on the left side there. Now, that's an interesting choice. We already talked about why this is a lot better and why you tend to smoke that side and Molotov this side. But maybe it doesn't really matter that much because, or maybe it's to try to entice the CTs to try to go for the picks. That's, logically speaking, that's what I would imagine. Given the fact that they can keep re-mollying this position, it might be that they're trying to bait the CTs to losing all of their weapons, which looks to be pretty effective. Because if we go back right now, let's go back right now. There is just no argument for Liquid to lose any of their weapons here. They've been outpositioned. The round is over. The round is completely over. They've got 2 smokes. That's basically it. They've got no flashbangs. They've only got these 2 positions to attack from. There's already basically a 4-man setup in the bomb site. They're never getting through. So one of the reasons that this could be the approach from the CTs is to entice them to try to take the jewels, because again, as we mentioned, this from the CT perspective, it feels like, if I just get a kill, if I can get a quick kill, we can go for this. And so I think that's probably what's happening here. And yes, they're getting murdered. So there you go. I hope this video was an informative one and you enjoyed it. There'll be more on NUKE. If you have any particular questions as to, things you don't understand about, the way certain rounds play out, questions that I didn't answer, whatever it might be, things you want to learn, that's follow the kind of methodology here of these videos. Let me know in the comments and I would be happy to oblige. Okay, cheers.